Well, today we're continuing in week 2 of a 3-week series called Picture Perfect. And what this series is about, it's about the real pressure that you and I face of trying to have everything figured out in life. Because let's be honest, we live in a culture that tells us that we are always supposed to be polished, that we're supposed to be successful. And even if you're not successful, you should look successful. You should dress successful. You should have it all figured out. And we live in a culture that tells us that we should be happy. But behind many of our smiles and behind many of our social posts, many of us are carrying stresses that nobody else knows about. We're carrying anxiety that nobody else knows about, exhaustion, insecurity, and maybe even depression. And what we're doing, the reason we get like this in our lives is because we are comparing our behind the scenes life to everybody else's highlight reel, right? Anybody else do this? I do this all the time, right? We're comparing what we struggle with and what nobody else knows about to everybody else's highlight reels. And so we wonder why our marriage and our children and our careers and our stages that we're in our lives don't look picture perfect like everybody else's. But what we're learning in this series is that God did not call you to have a perfect life. And more importantly, God did not call you to have a perfect image of a perfect life. He called you to follow him wholeheartedly and honestly with who you are. Because guess what? God can't help or bless who you pretend to be. He can only bless who you are in this moment. And so that's what we're doing in this series is we're looking at real life examples of people who even in the Bible struggle with comparison, and they struggle with it so bad that for a lot of them, it completely destroyed their lives. Last week, we looked at the story of Peter and John about how Jesus told Peter that he would be crucified. And what did Peter do? He looked directly at John and he said, well, what about John? All right. And this week, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 4. So if you got a Bible, go ahead and turn there. If you don't have a Bible, no worries. The verses will be on the screen, Genesis chapter 4. Now, before we dive in, I want to give you some context on what's happening leading up to our passage today. By the time we get to Genesis chapter 4, the world is already broken. Sin has already entered into the world because Adam and Eve, what did they do? They brought sin and ruined everybody's good time. They ruined everybody's life in the Garden of Eden. And so for the very first time, people are hiding from God. People are beginning to commit sins, and people are beginning to live in disobedience. And what we're going to see in Genesis chapter 4 is we are going to watch the ripple effects of sin. And what we're going to see is we are going to see sin spill over into relationships for the very first time in the world. Sin is going to spill over into the very relationships for the very first time and create conflict between two people, because what we're going to learn about today is the very first pair of brothers in human history named Cain and Abel. How many of you heard about Cain and Abel before? All of you, right? Here's the thing. Cain and Abel grew up in the same house. Cain and Abel grew up with the same parents. They grew up in the same lifestyle, yet they had two different hearts towards God. Their hearts could not have been any different when it comes to God. And so the Bible tells us that Abel was a shepherd. And the Bible says that Cain worked the soil. And at some point in time, both brothers bring an offering to God. What happens? You see, Abel brings the first of his flock, and Cain brought portions of the soil. You see the difference? Abel brought what? He brought the first and the best, and Abel brought the first and the best, and Cain brought the fruit of the soil. He brought some fruit of the soil. And then something happens. The Bible creates tension because the Bible says that God looked at favor on Abel's offering, but not on Cain's. He said, hey, I accept Abel's offering, but I'm going to reject Cain's offering. We're going to pick up the story in Genesis chapter 4, verse 6 through 13. You guys ready? All right, here we go. Then the Lord said to Cain, what did he say? Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? And look at verse 7. This is like a good life verse for some of you. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching where? At your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Verse 8. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, hey, let's go out to the field. Let's go have a good time. And while they were out in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel. And what did he do? Nothing like brotherly love, huh? Then the Lord said to Cain, where's your brother Abel? And what did he say? This is one of the most famous verses in the Bible. I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Verse 10, then the Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth and received your brother's blood from your hand. Verse 12, when you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. It says you will be restless wanderer where? On this earth. Verse 13, Cain said to the Lord, what did he say? He says, my punishment is more than I can bear. Last week I gave you 2 things that comparison does. This week I'm flipping the script and I'm giving you 4 things, okay, that comparison does when we shift our focus from ourselves and we begin to focus on other people. So if you're taking notes, which you should, write this down. Number 1, what does comparison do? Comparison will always change my heart. Comparison will always change my heart. Look at verse 6 again. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? Okay, we need to understand that the very first thing that comparison changes is not your circumstances. It doesn't change other people. Comparison will always change who? You. Cain looks at Abel and he sees Abel has been accepted and he sees Abel has been blessed. And instead of dealing in his own heart why he wasn't blessed, what does he do? He becomes angry. And why wasn't he blessed? Was it Cain's fault? Was it Abel's fault? No, it was Cain's fault. And this is what comparison does. It starts changing us from the inside out and it starts changing us internally. You see, comparison, what it does is it changes how we think. Comparison changes how we feel, and it eventually will change how you see people and how you treat people. And I want you to notice something. God immediately asked Cain, and he notices that something's off in Cain's heart. And God asked Cain, Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? In other words, because God is all-knowing, God is not asking a question ever to ever figure anything out. Because we already discovered it. He's already asked, God's already asked 3 or 4 questions. God is not asking 3 or 4 questions to figure something out. God is asking Cain, hey, do you know what's happening inside of you? Because I do. Do you know what's happening inside of you? Because I do. And if we're honest, a lot of us know exactly what this feels like. Because comparison has a way of changing our hearts. We start out happy for people. We start out celebrating people. We start out encouraging people, but then we keep scrolling, we keep looking around, and we keep comparing, and before long, something starts to shift inside of us. Suddenly, somebody else's success bothers you. Suddenly, somebody else's blessing frustrates you. Suddenly, somebody else's opportunity that you thought you should have gotten, but you didn't, begins to irritate you. We start feeling jealous and insecure and frustrated and bitter. Why? Because comparison will always make you focus on what you don't have instead of being grateful for what you do have. This is what comparison does. And the crazy thing is just like we're going to see in all of these stories, Cain's issue was never about Abel. Cain's issue was with himself. Peter's issue was not about John, because when he said, what about John? He didn't actually care about John. He just wanted to know why his story didn't look the way that he wanted it to look. He wanted to know why his story looked different. Now, the real issue was what comparison was producing in Cain's heart. And that's important because here's what we do. A lot of times when it comes to comparison and we start getting bitter and insecure and jealous, what we do is we go, well, if they would stop posting that, then I wouldn't feel that way. Why do they have to post it 3 or 4 times? Right? We know you got your hair done. Congratulations. We know you love your husband. Congratulations. How many times can people have an anniversary in 1 year? You know what I mean? We've been dating for 6 months. We've been married for 6 years and 34 days. And we start comparing, and what happens is all of a sudden we stop looking at people for who they are. And we start thinking our insecurities, like these people think they're better than us. They think that they're somebody different than me. But look what the Bible says in Proverbs 4:23. It says, above all else, guard what? Guard your heart, for everything, what does it do? Flows from it. above everything that you do, I want you to think about it. He says, above all else, guard your heart. Because if you guard your heart, then guess what? Everything else will probably work out in your life. If you guard your heart, then everything else will probably work out for you. That means this. This means that you get what gets in you will eventually come out of you. This means that whatever gets into your heart will eventually flow into your life. And if comparison gets into your heart, it will eventually flow into your attitude. It will eventually flow into your relationships. It will eventually affect your perspective, and it will eventually affect your peace. Let me go a little further. One of the most dangerous things about comparison is that it changes the heart slowly. It changes the heart slowly, and truthfully, we don't even notice it at first. You just become more cynical over time. You just become more negative over time, more insecure, more frustrated, and less grateful over time. You think all of a sudden that you just become insecure. No, it's happened slowly. It's a slow fade because all you've been doing is comparing and comparing and comparing and wonder why somebody else's story is different than you. And before long, what happens is you become a completely different person, one that you never thought you would become, one that you can't even identify for yourself until somebody else has to point out that, Justin, you are insecure. Because you are comparison, because you allowed something to enter into your mind, to enter into your heart, and to enter into your life that you should have never let enter. What does comparison do? It will always change your heart. Number 2, comparison opens the door to sin. Look at verse 7. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door, and guess what sin desires? It desires to have you. But guess what you must do to the sin? You must rule over it, okay? So God doesn't just confront Cain, he warns him. And what is the warning? The warning is that comparison is no longer just an emotion with Cain. Now it has become a threat to Cain. Now comparison has become a threat. God warns Cain and he tells them, be careful because sin, what is it doing? It is crouching at your door. That word crouching comes from the Hebrew word ravats. It doesn't look like ravats, but it's ravats because I asked Google and that's what it told me. I was like, are you sure? It's like, we're the smartest technology in the world. I was like, all right, I'm not going to question you. But here's what it means. It means to crouch, to lie in wait, to positions oneself ready to attack. Do you know what the Bible is saying here? The Bible is saying that sin is active, that sin is aggressive, that sin is a hungry animal that is crouching in your life or at the door of your life, and it is ready to maul you. It is ready to strike. It is ready to attack you. And so God, he is trying to warn Cain that sin wants to master him, that it wants control over him, that comparison wants to consume him, but it always starts out by crouching. You go to the zoo, what happens when you go to the glass? You ever seen those videos on TikTok where they turn their back to the glass? And what does the animal do? It starts creeping. It starts crouching, and then this it does one of those things to the glass. That's what happens. That's what sin does. But the difference is there's no glass between you and the enemy. He is at your door looking for who he may devour. My friends, the same is true for us. The same way that comparison wants to master Cain, comparison wants to master you. It wants to master your life because it is crouching at your door. And listen, it never shows up looking dangerous at first, does it? It never shows up looking dangerous. No, it starts small. You see, what does it do? Comparison starts as a thought. And then it turns into a frustration. Then it turns into a bit of jealousy. And then it turns into a little bit of insecurity. And over time, what happens? It eventually grows into something bigger. And this is why God tells Cain, you must rule over it. It's crouching at your door. What does that mean? That means it has not entered yet. It has not entered your home, but it's there. Meaning that you and I can be aware when we start to feel feelings that we shouldn't feel. That you and I begin to think things that we shouldn't think. That you and I begin to feel things that we should not feel. And before long enough, what happens? It becomes something big that is trying to devour us. And God says, you must rule over it. In other words, here's what God's telling Cain. Cain, you need to deal with this and you need to deal with it now. Cain, do not feed this. Do not let this sit in your heart. And here's why. It's a principle. If you're taking notes, write this down. You will eventually be devoured by what you refuse to defeat. That was way better than 3 mms. Jeez, old Pete. I wrote this and I thought, this is freaking good. And you go, It's like the beginning of a rap video, You will eventually be devoured by what you refuse to defeat. If you refuse to defeat comparison, it will devour you and it will kill you. It will maul you to death until all you do is beginning feeling bad about your own life, feeling bad about your own circumstances. Some of the greatest destructions in our lives didn't just happen suddenly, it actually happened slowly. You ever get to that moment and you go, how did I get here? It didn't happen in a moment, it happened slowly over time. It happens when we nurse bitterness, when we replay offenses, when we keep comparing, when we keep scrolling, when we keep feeding our insecurity. And all of a sudden, what you thought was just a moment of bitterness, what you thought was just a moment of insecurity, what you thought was just a moment of comparison was actually something that kept happening over and over and over again, and you didn't realize it until it actually ate you alive. It happens over and over and over, causing sin to slowly, in comparison, to slowly grow in your heart until now you become so insecure that you can't even function. To now you become so bitter at God, you don't think God has a plan for you anymore. And that your calling is not as good as somebody else's because all you're doing is comparing your behind the scenes to somebody else's highlight reel. I want you to understand something. Comparison is a sin. Anything that causes you to take your focus off God and your identity off God and put it on who you are or who you are not is a sin. It says this in the Bible in James chapter 1, verse 14 and 15. It says, but each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desires and are enticed. Then after the desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's fully grown, what does it do? It gives birth to death. You see, a lot of times when we read verses like this, we begin to think of sins in terms of majors and minors, right? How many of you guys like baseball? Major leagues and minor leagues, okay? And what we do is we compare our sin and we read verses like this and we talk about all these different kinds of sin and murder and idolatry. And we say, well, those are the majors and minor is just like, giving someone the bird and letting them know they're number one. That's a minor sin, right? Maybe that's how my mind works. Maybe you're just more spiritual than I am. I'm not trying to compare. I'm just saying. And we read verses like this, and what we do is we don't associate verses like this with envy. We don't associate verses like this with bitterness. We don't associate verses like this with insecurity. We don't associate verses like this with comparison. But what you need to know is that there is not a big league and there is not a minor league when it comes to sin. Every sin is in the category of major league. Every sin, even comparison. And when we treat any sin as small, and when we allow sin to go unchecked, it eventually will grow into something destructive, especially when it comes to comparison. Number 1, comparison changes my heart. Number 2, comparison opens the door to sin. And number 3, comparison damages relationships. Genesis chapter 4, verse 8. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were there in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel. And what did he do? He killed him. Okay, don't miss this. The very first relationship destroyed in the Bible and the very first death in human history came because of comparison. The very first murder ever committed in the Bible, the very first person to ever die, died because his brother was jealous. Because his brother compared their gifts. I want you to think about how crazy that is. That the third person in the Bible died because of comparison. Like when you really think about it in those terms, it didn't take long for comparison to ruin somebody's life. It didn't take long for comparison for somebody else to have comparison and commit murder. It took the third and fourth stinking person in the Bible. That's how serious and damaging that comparison can be. They were the third and fourth people created, and it didn't take long for comparison to ruin their lives. Why did it happen so fast? Because comparison makes other people's blessings feel like our losses. And I shared my examples of that last week, but some of the relationships that you and I have damaged the most weren't destroyed because of their actions. They were destroyed because of our insecurities. Relationships are not always destroyed because of actions. Sometimes they are destroyed because of insecurity. They were destroyed by jealousy and envy and comparison. And if left unchecked, comparison will destroy friendships. Comparison will destroy marriages because it says, why doesn't my husband do that? Why doesn't my wife do that? It will affect the way you treat your children and view your children and go, why aren't my children like this? Why can't my kids be like their kids? Because comparison eventually turns companions into competitors. And who you used to love and care about, now you're in competition with them because you're comparing yourself to them. It will always turn companions into competitors. Look what the Bible says. Another verse that we always don't understand, Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. This is a great verse that people use in time of tragedy. You got tragedy in your life, I'm going to rejoice with you. I'm going to mourn with you. Right? Do you know why this verse is difficult sometimes? Because it's hard to celebrate people when comparison is living in your heart. It's hard to celebrate people when you feel like they got something that you deserved. It's hard to celebrate people when you feel like you got overlooked and God blessed them and accepted their offering instead of yours. God never called us to compete with one another. He called us to honor one another, to celebrate each other's success. And maybe some of us need to ask ourselves, have I allowed comparison to not only change the way I see people, but have I allowed comparison to change the way that I treat people? Because for a lot of you, the reason some of your relationships strain is because you're comparing somebody that you love to somebody that you shouldn't be comparing them to. And can I tell you this? Most people will not meet your expectations. Most people will let you down. Most people, guess what, will not look like somebody else. That's the way that it is. Comparison. It changes my heart. It opens the door to sin. It damaged my relationship. And number 4, the very last thing is this, is that comparison has consequences. Cain said to the Lord, what did he say? He said, my punishment is what? It's more than I can bear. By the end of the story, Cain is overwhelmed, he's crushed, and he is completely undone. Why? Because comparison never just affects how you feel, it will eventually affect how you live. Comparison will not just affect how you feel, it will always affect how you live. You see, comparison, what does it do? It is a bacteria that will enter your bloodstream and affect how you live your life. It is a disease, it is a virus, and when it does, it distorts your perspective, it decreases your gratitude, and eventually it will ruin your relationships, even the people that you love, your own brothers, your own sisters, maybe your own spouses. And the crazy thing is this comparison never actually makes your life better, it makes your life more miserable. We toss and turn about other people's lives. We struggle with comparison thinking, hey, I'm going to just fester over all these people, and you think that it motivates you, but it actually doesn't. It actually drains you. Because comparison never makes your life better. It makes you more miserable about and with what you already have. And this is what was struggling with Cain. Cain could not enjoy his own calling. He couldn't enjoy his own opportunities. He couldn't even enjoy his own brother. Heck, Cain couldn't even enjoy his relationship with God, and the same is true for us. Comparison will make you feel like you're losing even when you may actually be the one winning. Comparison will make you feel like you're losing even when you may be the one winning. This is why sometimes we can have healthy marriage, and you can have a healthy marriage, you can have great kids, you can have a good job, you can have a best friend or two and still feel empty in your life. Because comparison distorts what God is actually doing inside of you and around you. Comparison blinds you to what you already have. Ecclesiastes 4:4 says this, and I saw that all toil and all achievements, how many? All spring from one person's envy of another. This too, what is it? Meaningless. It's like chasing after the wind. I want us to really understand what Solomon is actually saying here. What Solomon is saying is that much of what drives people is not purpose. Much of what drives us is not our calling, and it's not even passion. A lot of what drives you and drives me in life is comparison. In other words, Solomon is saying a lot of people work hard, and a lot of people chase success, and a lot of people chase more, not because God told them to, but because they're trying to keep up with somebody else. A lot of us are chasing more things and more status and more money and more calling and more purpose, not because God has told you to, but because you saw somebody else had something that you wanted or something that you thought that you needed. Or you felt like they were more important to you, and the thing that you think that you lack is going to give you more purpose and a higher calling. It's going to give you more status, but that's not the way it works. What happens is they see somebody else's house. They see somebody else's platform. They see somebody else's success. They see somebody else's lifestyle, and they think, I need that too. Preston, you can come out. They think, I need that too. I need to prove myself too. I need to level up too. And Solomon says that kind of living, guess what it is? It's like chasing the wind. It's like chasing the wind. Why? Because like the wind, you never catch it because there's always more to chase. That's why you get a job, and guess what? You get a better promotion, and what happens? You're not satisfied. That's why some of y'all got married thinking it was the key to life. And you're not satisfied. Because you think that when you reach a certain level that that's contentment, that that's it. If I can just get this, then I'll have this. And the only reason you think that is because you're comparing it to somebody else. They seem happy driving that car. If I get that car, I'll be happy too. They seem closer with God because they got the iPhone 29. Whatever. Why, some of you actually need a flip phone with no internet search, no pictures, no camera to take selfies on. If it is, and it's distorted, pixelated. If you don't look good on a flip phone, you don't look good, by the way. I'm just letting you know. That's when you knew you looked real good. When a picture came through on that flip phone, we're like, yeah, I think they look all right. Yeah, I think they look good. Solomon says that kind of living is like chasing the wind. Why? Because like the wind, guess what you never do? You'll never catch it. You'll never actually catch it because there's always more to chase. Can I tell you, there's always going to be one more promotion. I need one more promotion. And then what happens? You get promoted and you get more duties, but you don't get more pay. I need an executive pastor right now. You can get a promotion, but I'm not paying you anything. Come on. To see how much you want the glory. There's always one more achievement to make. For some pastors, their church is never big enough. And for some, it's never small enough. For some of us, our cars are never good enough. It never has low enough mileage. Our clothes we never have too many of them. Some of you have so many clothes in your closet, it's ridiculous. And you're chasing the wind because you think you got to have a new look every single day. I'm trying to free some of y'all up, by the way. And there's nothing wrong with having nice things, but the difference is why you're chasing it. There's always one more purchase to make. There's always one more comparison. And here's the problem with comparison. Comparison, what it does is it keeps moving the finish line backwards. And it keeps saying, okay, now I achieved this, but now I need this. And now I need this. And now I need this. And it keeps going down the line until eventually you end up with everything you have and realizing you've got nothing that you actually want. Because you chase after things instead of chasing after the one. Instead of chasing after God. That's why you can achieve more, buy more, grow more, and still feel empty just like Cain. Cain couldn't enjoy what he had because he wanted what somebody else had gotten. William Barclay said this: a man who is content to be what God made him will never envy what God gave another man. So as we close this morning, we need to understand that Genesis 4 is not just a story about Cain. No, it's a warning to what comparison can do to any of us if we leave comparison unchecked. Because comparison doesn't just make you insecure, it changes you. Comparison turns grateful people into bitter people. Comparison turns kind people into jealous people. It turns humble people into prideful people. And it turns loving people into cold-blooded people. That's what comparison does. I think one of the saddest parts of this story is that Cain never actually dealt with what was happening inside of him. He just kept looking sideways at Abel. You noticing a trend in our first 2 weeks? Their attention on who was next to them instead of their relationship with God. And for some of us, that's exactly where we are today. James 3:16 says this: for where you have where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. I want you to notice that ambition. What word is before that? Selfish. So is it wrong to have ambition? No, some of you are too lazy. I'm just being honest. You don't want to go to work, you don't want to serve at church, you don't want to cut your grass, whatever, you're lazy. You have no ambition. You need to get some ambition. Anybody want to say amen? Okay, thank you. All right. Nothing wrong with ambition, but when your ambition is selfish, meaning it's for your own desire, you want more money, but you don't want to give to the kingdom. You don't want to make anybody else's life better. You just want to have more for yourself. That's selfish ambition. Like, I want to have kids, so I have a purpose instead of having kids to love and raise God. Raised to love God. That's selfish ambition. I know I just spoiled some of y'all's cereal, but that's the way it is, right? Selfish ambition. Some of you only want to get up here on a platform to sing because you think that we all want to hear you. Being honest. You want to sing for you instead of singing to God. It's selfish ambition. Any of you here who have a desire to preach, and you don't want to preach because God put a word in your heart, you want to preach because you want a platform. It's selfish ambition. You want to run for politics to make the place better or to post yourself up. Selfish ambition. It's not wrong to have ambition, but when it's for you and of you and by you and produced by you, that's selfish ambition. And where you have selfish ambition, you have disorder. And where you have disorder, you have every evil practice. He is saying that when comparison or where comparison lives, peace will always leave. Because comparison and peace cannot live in the same heart, cannot live in the same house. It cannot live in the same tent. And maybe today the issue is not that God hasn't been good to you. Maybe the issue is that comparison has blinded you to what God has already done for you. That comparison has blinded you to what God has already done in you. And the things that you prayed for, God gave you, but the things you prayed for and God gave you aren't enough for you anymore. I remember praying for people just to show up for church. God, if you will just help me start a church, I'll be satisfied. And I started the church. And I said, God, now if people will just show up regularly. And then what happens is some of y'all miss, and I'm just going to confess my sins. I struggle with comparison and say, I'm here, why aren't you? See what I mean? Now you should be here, I'm just saying. I'm not giving you a free pass, I'm just saying. And what happens is the comparison makes me focus on who isn't here versus who is here. That's something I struggle with, just telling you. We all are guilty of this. And then I have to ask, why do I want everyone here? Why do I care that the seats are filled? Is it because it feels good? Because I get to say I had this many people at a church when I go hang around my pastors? Or is it because I want people to hear the gospel and have their lives changed? It's a battle that I have, just like you have your own struggles. But you can't have peace and comparison at the same time. And so my challenge for you this week is simple. Stop measuring your worth. Stop measuring your success. Stop measuring your value. Stop measuring your marriage, and stop measuring your children. Stop measuring your friendship against everybody else's. And start asking God to help you become more grateful and more content and more at peace than what he has already given you, rather than wanting what somebody else has. Because real peace is never found in trying to keep up with everybody else. Real peace is found in trusting God with your own life and your own story. Nobody's life ever got better because of comparison. Nobody walked away and say, thank God I compare my life to Jeremiah because my life is so much better. Thank God I compare my life to Nate. No one does that. No one's life is better because of that. It will leave you miserable, defeated, depressed, broken down. And for a lot of you here right now, that sin of comparison is crouching at your door. And what you need to do is not delete them off Facebook because you're jealous of them. Maybe what you need to do is just delete your Facebook. Yeah. I can't live without it. You're not living with it. And that goes for a lot of different things. I could keep preaching on this for another hour, which I'm going to next week. But you don't have to struggle with comparison. We all do it. I get it. We all have our things and our issues, me, myself included. But man, what if we started comparing ourselves to God? What if the only mirror in our life that we looked at to see who we look like was the mirror of the Bible? That we looked here and say, hey, I'm not worried about looking like anybody else other than who God has called me to look like. God has called me to look like his son. That is who I'm striving for. That is what I'm chasing after. That is all I care to look like. I want you to think about something for a minute. I know Preston's probably thinking, why did I come up here so early? Because it's in my notes. It's in my notes. Thank you, Preston. Cain struggled with comparison. And I'm just thinking out loud. And I probably shouldn't do this because I didn't prepare this. But they both brought an offering to God, right? Abel brought the first, yeah. And Cain brought what was left. Can I tell you, that's sin, right? That's sin. So his own disobedience led him to comparing the discipline from God to his brother. And here's what I just feel led to tell you. Some of you, the reason that you don't have what you want to have is not because God gave it to somebody else. It's because you didn't do what God told you to do in the first place. And because you didn't do what God told you to do in the first place, you become bitter at someone else who did the right thing in the first place and was blessed because they did what God told them to do. So there's more levels to this than we realize. What does that mean? I think it's in Jeremiah. It says, if you meditate on my word day and night and be careful to do everything that's in it, all your ways will be successful and you will prosper. So what is it? Obedience versus disobedience. Cain disobeyed and he started comparing to why God blessed Abel instead. The fruit is in obedience. And when you're obedient to the Lord, you will not be distracted by somebody else's blessing because you know that God has something for you because your obedience back to God. Would you stand to your feet? I want you to bow your heads and close your eyes if you don't mind. I need to pull up my pants. I want you to have an honest moment with God. And I want you to talk to God, and I want you to have a real conversation with him about your heart and about what you have been comparing your life to or who you've been comparing your life with. And like me today, maybe you need to say, God, I'm sorry that I have compared my calling to the pastor down the street. God, I'm sorry that I've compared my members to the members that I'm used to in the Midwest. God, I'm sorry that I've compared these people to even myself. Forgive me of that. And help me to walk faithfully in my own calling, knowing that even if nobody showed up and I still preached today, that I was still obedient in my purpose, that I was still obedient in my calling. And I'm just trying to give you examples for your own life, for your own self, because my life is different than yours. And so maybe what you need to do is say, God, I'm sorry for comparing my spouse to this person. Or God, I'm sorry for comparing the children that you blessed me with, that you gave me, to these other children because they're different, or they think different, or they have higher IQ scores, or they can do this or do that. God, I'm sorry that I've compared my calling as insignificant compared to somebody else's because they made more, because they got a platform, or because whatever. Whatever it is for you, you are smart people. You need to talk to God about that. I'm going to give you a second to do that. Lord, I come before you, and we come before you, God, asking for your grace, asking for forgiveness, asking for forgiveness over every selfish ambition that we have had in our own lives. And it's different for every person. It's different for me than to the people in the crowd and the people to the left of them, to the right of them. But God, we've all done it. And some of us are doing it. Some of us did it on the way here this morning, arguing with our family, arguing with our spouses. But God, comparison is a thief and the enemy of joy. And so God, we want our purpose to be your purpose. We want our identity to be found in you. And God, we are no longer slave to sin. We are no longer slave to comparison. And we know, God, that it's crouching at the door, because we live in a world that tells us that we have to be picture perfect, that we've got to look a certain way, act a certain way, dress a certain way. I pray, God, that you free up every person that's here today who's insecure about the way they look, that they don't look like somebody else, God, that you help them with comparison. I pray for the parent that's here today, God, who's struggling, whose kid may be autistic, whose kid may not speak well, whose kid may have some kind of issue just like my kid does. That you free them up, God, that they would know that you love their children and that you have created their children perfect and that you love them, God, and that your hand is all over their life and that they will do great things differently, God, for your kingdom than any other kid could. Pray for every person here who's struggling in their marriage because of comparison. Pray for every Christian that's in here who's struggling with their calling because of comparison. I pray for every person in here who hates their car, who hates their house because of comparison, that you free us up today, dear Jesus.